Matthew Reed didn't know that August morning that the woman he was about to meet would completely change the course of his life. He also couldn't have imagined that the rusty key he'd kept for 3 years in the kitchen drawer, entrusted to him by old Walter just before he died, would be the gateway to a world he never planned to touch. And he certainly couldn't have foreseen that, by opening that abandoned house for a stranger with tired eyes and hands too delicate to carry lumber, he'd actually be opening his own heart to something he didn't even know he was still capable of feeling. Matthew was 34, with broad shoulders marked by the sun and the weight of milk pails carried since boyhood, and a calm way of speaking that made people trust him without him having to ask. He always wore the same 3 faded plaid shirts and cracked leather boots that his father had bought 20 years ago. He had dark, deep eyes like a farm well, and the same utility. You only saw what was at the bottom if you stopped long enough to look closely. Few did. He preferred it that way. Since his mother had died 12 years ago, Matthew lived alone on the farm he'd inherited from his father, keeping everything exactly as it had always been. The milking at 5 in the morning, the garden aligned in straight rows, the silence respected like a prayer. But that morning was different. The sound came before the sight. A low, smooth rumble of an imported engine, totally out of place on that dirt road that creaked under the tires of old pickup trucks and horse-drawn wagons. Matthew was fixing the corral fence when he heard it. He lifted his head slowly, brow furrowed, and saw the red dust cloud rising in the distance like smoke from a silent fire. Then came the car. Black, gleaming, tinted windows, so clean it seemed to belong to a different ground altogether. The vehicle passed him slowly, almost hesitantly, and stopped right in front of the gate to Mr. Walter's farm. The same farm that had been closed up, abandoned, swallowed by weeds since the old man had passed 3 years before. Matthew dropped the hammer to the ground, wiped his hands on his dirt-streaked jeans, and walked slowly to the fence that divided the 2 properties. He stood there, watching. The car door opened, and then he saw her. She stepped out like someone descending from a stage. Immaculate beige linen pants, white long-sleeved blouse, oversized sunglasses for her slender face. Hair pulled into a low bun that should have looked careless but on her seemed intentional, studied. Her skin was too fair for someone born under that sun. Her small, callus-free hands held a leather bag that probably cost more than Matthew made in 6 months. She looked at the house like someone gazing at the ruins of a castle, curiosity mixed with fear, nostalgia hidden behind a mask of indifference. She stood there for almost a minute. Then she walked to the gate, hesitant, stepping carefully as if the ground might give way under her feet. She pulled a key from her pocket, old, rust-covering part of the metal, and tried to fit it into the padlock. She turned it, forced it, tried again. Nothing. The padlock was stuck, probably corroded by time and rain. She let out a long, tired sigh and removed her sunglasses. That's when Matthew saw her face fully. Deep brown eyes, almost golden in the morning light. Delicate features, but a line of tension etched between her eyebrows. She wasn't just beautiful. She was the kind of woman who carried invisible weight on her shoulders. Matthew cleared his throat softly. She turned quickly, startled, slipping her sunglasses back on like armor. "Sorry to scare you," he said, his voice rough from speaking little. "But if you're trying to get in there, that padlock isn't going to budge. It's been jammed for a while." She sized him up from head to toe. He saw the distrust in her eyes, the way her hand gripped the bag tighter. "And how would you know that?" "Because I tried to open it a few months back. Wanted to check if anything was spoiling inside." He paused. "I was neighbors with your Walter, Matthew Reed. I live over there." He nodded toward the farm next door. The name seemed to have an effect. She relaxed her shoulders just a little. "You knew my grandfather?" "Knew him. Well, he was a friend of my father's. After my dad passed, Walter kind of kept an eye on me. Taught me a lot." Matthew took 2 steps toward her but stopped before invading her space. "He gave me a copy of the key. Said if anyone from the family ever came back and needed to get in, I could help." She was silent. She seemed to be processing the information, deciding whether to trust him. "You have that key now?" "I do. I can fetch it if you want." More silence. Then, finally, she nodded. A sharp, almost reluctant motion. "Please." Matthew walked back to his house unhurriedly. went through the kitchen door, opened the drawer where he kept things without a proper place, twine, old batteries, his father's pocket knife, and Walter's key, attached to a worn leather keychain. He grabbed it and returned. She was still there, standing in front of the gate like a pillar of salt. He opened the padlock without trouble. The metal groaned, resisted, but gave way. The gate creaked when Matthew pushed it open, a shrill sound that cut through the morning silence like nails on a chalkboard. She passed by him without a word, but he caught her scent. Something floral, expensive, completely out of place amid the smell of damp earth and dry manure that dominated that patch of world. They walked along the stone path to the house porch. The wood was worn, some boards loose, cobwebs filling the corners. She stopped in front of the door, took a deep breath. Matthew offered her the key. She took it but couldn't fit it into the lock. Her hand was shaking. He noticed but didn't comment. He just waited. After 3 tries, she managed. The key turned. The door opened slowly, heavy, complaining from rusty hinges. And then the smell invaded everything. Mold, dust, old wood, memories canned in stagnant air. She took a step inside. Stopped. Her breathing quickened. Matthew stayed outside, respecting the moment. The living room was exactly as Walter had left it. Frayed fabric sofa, dusty bookshelf with books, coffee table with the same crocheted doily that her grandmother, whom Matthew had never met, must have made decades ago. Framed photo on the wall, Walter young, in a hat, beside a smiling woman. A smaller photo on the sideboard, a girl in a white dress, no more than 7, sitting on his lap. She picked up the picture frame. Her hands were still trembling. "That's me," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Matthew didn't respond. He just watched as she scanned the house with her eyes, every corner, every object, every mark of time frozen there inside. She ran her fingers over the table. Dust stuck to her fair skin. How long ago was it that he... Her voice faltered. 3 years, almost 4. She swallowed hard, closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there were tears held back with effort. "I should have come sooner. I didn't come to the funeral. I was..." She stopped, breathed. "It doesn't matter where I was. I should have come." Matthew wanted to say something, that it wasn't her fault, that Walter understood, that the old man always spoke of her with pride even though she was far away. But he knew words didn't fix regret, so he just said, "He kept everything, as if he knew you'd come back one day." She looked at him, really looked. And for the first time since stepping out of the car, she seemed to see Matthew as a person, not part of the scenery. "Thank you," she said, her voice low but firm, "for taking care of this, for being here. No need to thank me. Your grandfather would have done the same for me." She nodded slowly. Then she looked around again, and Matthew realized she hadn't come just to open the house. She'd come for something bigger. He just didn't know what yet. "Are you staying?" he asked, not quite sure why he was asking. She took a while to answer. When she spoke, it seemed like she was answering herself more. "I don't know. Maybe. For a few days. I need to think. If you need anything, just call. I'm right over there." She nodded, but her gaze was distant again, lost somewhere between the dusty past of that living room and the uncertain future waiting outside. Matthew left slowly, closing the door behind him. He went back to his farm, but something in him knew, with the same certainty he knew when rain was coming before the clouds arrived, that that woman would bring change, and that nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. Isabella didn't leave the next day, nor the one after. On the morning of the 3rd day, Matthew saw her through the kitchen window while having coffee. She was on Walter's porch, sitting in an old rocking chair, staring at the horizon like someone searching for an answer in a place without questions. She wore a simple white t-shirt and the same linen pants from the first day, now with red dust stains on the hems. Her hair was loose, tousled by the wind. She seemed smaller like that, less guarded. He finished his coffee, washed the mug, grabbed a toolbox and crossed the property line. She heard his footsteps and turned her head. She didn't smile, but she didn't seem bothered either. "Good morning," he said, stopping about 3 meters away. "Good morning." Silence. The wind rustled the leaves of the peach tree in the yard. A mourning dove cooed somewhere distant. "I came to see if you need help with anything," Matthew said, lifting the toolbox. "There are some things here that need urgent fixing. Faucet, plumbing, roof. If you want to stay longer, better fix them soon before they turn into bigger problems." She looked at him, then at the box, then back at him. Something shifted in her expression. A defense dropping, exhaustion rising to the surface. "I don't know how long I'll stay," she said, her voice lower than before. "But yes, I'll take the help." Matthew nodded and started with the kitchen pipes. Isabella stayed nearby, watching in silence as he worked, disassembling, adjusting, tightening. His hands were large, thick, but moved with precision. She noticed the scars on his knuckles, the cracked skin around his nails, the sure way he held each tool like an extension of his own body. "Your grandfather taught me half of what I know," Matthew commented without taking his eyes off the pipe. "He said a man who can't fix what's broken becomes dependent on others. That you have to be self-sufficient, but not too proud to ask for help when you need it." Isabella sat in the chair by the table, ran her hand over the worn wooden top. He was like that, full of ready phrases. A pause. "My father hated it." Matthew glanced at her but didn't comment. He just kept working. "My father thought my grandfather was outdated, stubborn. Said he wasted his life here, that he could have sold everything and lived well in the city." Her voice carried something between anger and sadness. "They fought a lot over it. And you? What do you think?" She took a while to answer. When she spoke, it was almost a whisper. "I don't know. I spent my whole life thinking my father was right. That success was money, power, influence. But now," she looked around at the old furniture, the peeling walls, the sunlight entering through the dusty window. "Now I don't know anything anymore." Matthew closed the valve, tested the faucet. Water flowed clean, no leaks. He stood, wiped his hands on an old rag. "Your grandfather used to say the land doesn't lie, that it gives back exactly what you plant." He put the tools back in the box. "Maybe you just need to figure out what you want to plant." She stared at him. There was something in her eyes, a hunger, a search, a silent plea for answers Matthew didn't have. But he held her gaze, steady, unhurried. And then she looked away, swallowing something she couldn't say. "Thank you," she murmured, "for the faucet, and the rest." He just nodded and left. In the following days, a routine established itself without prior agreement. Matthew showed up every morning with some task: cleaning gutters, fixing windows, checking the roof structure. Isabella started to help. At first, shyly, just holding tools or passing nails. But gradually she did more. She learned to use the drill, to hammer without bending the nail, to distinguish screws by size. Her delicate hands began to develop small blisters. She didn't complain. One afternoon, while they were sanding the porch wood, Matthew commented, "You learn fast." She stopped, wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of sawdust on her skin. "My job was solving problems all day long. Negotiations, contracts, crises." A tired half-smile. "This here is simpler. Straightforward. Broken, fix it. No maneuvering, no politics. You worked for your father." The smile faded. "I work. Still do. At least officially." She went back to sanding with unnecessary force. Or worked. I don't know. I kind of left without telling. Matthew stopped sanding. Looked at her. "Does he know you're here?" "He knows I left. Doesn't know where to." Her voice hardened. "And if he did, he'd probably have already sent someone to fetch me. Why did you run?" She dropped the sandpaper, sat on the porch step, hugged her knees. Matthew sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "Because my father wants to sell this farm," she said, her voice firm but loaded. "There's a developer interested in building a rural subdivision here, $1 million project. He'd already started negotiating without even consulting me. When I found out and said I wanted to think about it, he set up a family meeting to pressure me. Told me I was being childish, sentimental, irrational, that this land isn't worth anything if it doesn't turn a profit. And you disagree." It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Isabella looked at him, her eyes shone. Anger, pain, confusion. I don't know if I disagree. I just know that when he gave me the ultimatum to sell, something inside me froze, and I grabbed the key my grandmother left me, got in the car, and came. To run away. To decide. She corrected, her voice rising a tone. Then she softened. For the first time in my life, I wanted to decide alone, without pressure, without my father dictating what's right. I just needed to breathe. Matthew was silent. Then he said, "Your grandfather said big decisions aren't made with a hot head, that you have to let the dust settle, the water clear. Only then do you see the bottom clearly." She let out a low, almost sad laugh. "You talk just like him." I learned from him. More silence. Good this time. Comfortable. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky orange and pink. A heron flew low, heading to the pond on the other side of the road. "You're right," Isabella said, her voice soft. "I need to let the dust settle." And for the first time since arriving, she seemed to really believe it. The following week, Isabella traded her city clothes for more practical ones. Old jeans she found in her grandfather's closet, long-sleeved shirts, rubber boots 2 sizes too big that blistered her heels. She didn't mind. She started waking with the sun, making breakfast on the wood stove that Matthew taught her to light, tending to the chicken coop that had 5 scrawny but stubborn hens. She learned to harvest vegetables from the small garden Walter had kept, which was now producing again under her care. Matthew kept showing up, but now it was she who sought out tasks. "Teach me to fix the fence. Show me how the water system works. I need to learn to take care of the chickens right." He taught with patience, repeating as many times as necessary, never making her feel incapable. And gradually, something changed in her. Her shoulders relaxed. Her face lost that permanent line of tension. She smiled more. Small smiles, but genuine. She laughed when a hen escaped with an egg in its beak, when she missed the nail and hit her own finger, when she tripped in the brush because she still hadn't learned to walk on that uneven ground. Matthew watched the transformation in silence, and without realizing it, he began to look forward to the mornings with a strange anticipation. The desire to cross that property line and find her on the porch, discover what clothes she'd wear, hear what questions she'd ask, see what new skills she'd try to master. She was opening up, and without wanting to, she was opening him too. One afternoon, while cleaning the old barn together, Isabella stopped mid-sweep and said, "Thank you, Matthew." He stopped too, leaning on the hoe handle. For what? For not judging me, for not asking too much, for being here. He didn't know what to say, so he just said, "We take care of what matters. Your grandfather mattered to me, and you're part of him." She held his gaze a second longer than needed. Something passed between them, electric, inexplicable, frightening. Then she went back to sweeping and he to digging. But both knew something had changed, and there was no going back. 2 weeks later, Isabella no longer looked like the same woman who'd stepped out of that black car. Her hands had new calluses. Her face was lightly sunburned even with the straw hat Matthew had lent her, and her clothes smelled of earth, sweat, and freedom. She woke before 6, lit the wood stove without help, made strong, bitter coffee the way her grandfather liked it, and went out to tend the chickens before the heat set in. Matthew started showing up, not just to fix things, but to work together. He taught her to hoe without pulling up the good plants, to water at the right time, to recognize when the soil needed rest. She absorbed it all with a hunger he'd never seen before. Not hunger for food, but for purpose, for belonging, for roots. One clear-skied morning, while the two replanted tomato seedlings in the garden, Isabella commented, "I forgot what it's like to wake up without a phone ringing, without a 9 o'clock meeting, without having to decide the fate of 300 people before lunch." Matthew buried a seedling carefully, packed the soil around it. "Do you miss it?" she thought. Wiped the dirt from her hands on her pants. The job? No. The decision-making power? Maybe, but not the way it was. She looked at him. There I decided things that affected people I didn't even know. Here I decide if the chicken gets corn or feed. And somehow this feels more real. He smiled faintly. A rare, genuine smile. "Your grandfather said greatness isn't in the size of the decision. It's in the responsibility you take for it." He had an answer for everything, huh? Not for everything, but for most things that matter. She went back to planting, but the silence now was different. Comfortable, conspiratorial. Matthew realized he liked it. Liked working beside her, the synchronized rhythm they were developing, the way she learned quickly but wasn't ashamed to ask again when she forgot. But not everyone in the area saw her presence with good eyes. Silas Turner lived 3 properties down. He was a man in his 60s, back curved from carrying weight his whole life, face weathered by the sun and suspicion. He'd known Walter, worked with him on harvest crews, shared whiskey and silences on full moon nights. But he'd never seen any relatives of the old man around, and now suddenly a granddaughter in high heels shows up wanting to play farm girl. Isabella met him for the first time at Darius's general store, the warehouse that served as market, bar, and meeting point for everyone within a 15-mile radius. She'd gone to get coarse salt and kerosene. Silas was leaning on the counter, nursing a warm beer when she walked in. The silence was immediate. 3 men talking about the rain stopped mid-sentence. Darius, behind the counter, nodded in neutral greeting. Isabella felt the weight of the stares but kept her posture straight. She asked for what she needed. Paid. When she turned to leave, Silas spoke, not to her but loud enough for everyone to hear. City folk never respected the land. Come here, use it, and when they're tired, they abandon it. Isabella stopped, turned slowly, looked at him. Are you talking to me? I'm talking about what I'm seeing. Walter's granddaughter, who never set foot here in life, now shows up after he dies. Silas spat on the floor. Bet she's just wanting to sell everything to some city developer. Her chest tightened. Anger rose fast, hot, but she breathed deeply, held it. You don't know me, she said, her voice firm but controlled. You don't know why I came or what I want. Don't need to know. I know the type. What type? Spoiled rich kid playing farm. In 2 weeks you'll be back in your penthouse apartment and this land will turn into a subdivision. Isabella clenched her fists. Her nails, now dirt-stained, dug into her palms. She wanted to yell, curse, prove he was wrong. But she did none of that. She just said, I didn't come here to prove anything to you. I came to prove it to myself. And she left. When she got home, Matthew was fixing a back bedroom window. He saw her enter with a closed face, tense shoulders, eyes shining with contained anger. Something happened? She dropped the purchases on the table with unnecessary force. Your friend Silas. Matthew set down the screwdriver. What did he do? Judged me. Accused me of being here just passing through, wanting to sell everything. Said I'm a spoiled rich kid playing farm. Matthew sighed, ran a hand through his hair. Silas is complicated. He's seen too many city people buy land here, promise to take care of it, and then sell to speculators. He lost half his property that way. His son sold without telling him, and now it's a subdivision. That doesn't justify it. No, but it explains it. Isabella sat in the chair, let her head fall into her hands. I don't know what I'm doing, Matthew. I don't know if I'll stay, if I'll sell, if I'll go back. I just know that here I can breathe. And that has to count for something, doesn't it? He approached, sat in the chair beside her, didn't touch her but got close enough for her to feel his presence. It counts a lot. Pause. But no one besides you needs to understand that now. You don't owe explanations to Silas or me or anyone. The only person you need to convince is yourself. She lifted her head, looked at him, really looked, as if seeing for the first time the weight of his words. The sincerity etched on that simple, honest face without masks. How do you do that? Do what? Say exactly what I need to hear without sounding like you're trying to please me. He shrugged. I just tell the truth, it's easier that way. She smiled, a tired but real smile. Thank you. Always. That night, Isabella couldn't sleep. She stayed on the porch wrapped in an old blanket, looking at the stars that seemed closer there than anywhere she'd ever been. The moon was full, illuminating the pastures with soft silver light. She thought of her father, the company, the life she'd left behind. Thought of Silas and his distrust. Thought of Matthew and the way he made her feel seen, not judged. And for the first time in years, she cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. As if something trapped inside her had finally found a way out. In the following days, Isabella worked with even more vigor, not to prove anything to Silas, but to prove it to herself. She learned to milk the only cow left on the property, a task Matthew taught with infinite patience, guiding her hands in the first attempts, showing the rhythm, the right pressure. She felt the warmth of his hands over hers, and something stirred in her chest, something she hadn't felt in far too long. They started working together on renovating the old barn. It was Isabella's idea: turn the space into a spot for artisanal cheese production and preserves. She had contacts in the city, knew distributors, knew how to set up a small but profitable business. Matthew had the land knowledge, the old recipes, the labor. Together they seemed complete. One afternoon, while carrying lumber boards to the barn, Isabella stopped midway. Matthew, coming behind, almost bumped into her. "What is it?" She turned. Her eyes shone, but this time it wasn't anger or sadness. It was something else, something he couldn't name right away. "You helped me open this house," she said, her voice low but firm. "But you also opened something else in me, something I didn't even know existed." Matthew felt his heart race. He didn't know what to say, so he stayed quiet. "I don't know how long I'll stay here," she continued, "but I know that while I do, I want you with me. Not just as a neighbor, not just as a friend." She swallowed hard. "As a partner, for real." He let the wood drop to the ground, took a step toward her. Another, stopped a few inches away. For the first time in 12 years, since his mother had died and he'd decided solitude was safer than pain, Matthew allowed something inside him to open. "I just wanted to help," he said, his voice rough. "But if you want, I can make room in my future for you too." She smiled, a true whole smile without reservations. And then, without thinking, without planning, she took the last step and rested her forehead against his. They stayed like that, breathing the same air, sharing the same silence, planting the same wordless promise. And the world around them disappeared. There was only there, only now, only the two of them, and the land that had brought them together. The following weeks were the lightest Matthew had felt in years. He and Isabella worked side by side every day, renovating the barn, testing cheese recipes with milk from Matthew's cow, planting herbs she said were essential for premium preserves. She brought city ideas. He brought land knowledge. The combination worked with a naturalness that scared them both. At night, after work, they'd sit on the porch with hot coffee and stay there, talking about everything and nothing, laughing at jokes only they understood, sharing silences that weighed less each day. Matthew told her about his mother, how he'd lost her to cancer in a cold city hospital, how he'd returned to the farm and decided never to leave again. Isabella told him about her controlling father, the pressure of being the only child of a business empire, how she'd spent her whole life trying to prove she was good enough. "And here?" Matthew asked one night, his gaze fixed on the stars. "Do you feel good enough?" She took a while to answer. When she spoke, her voice was low, honest. "Here I feel. Me. Just that. And maybe that's more than enough." He turned his face to her, held her gaze, said nothing, but his hand found hers in the space between the chairs, fingers intertwined, calluses against skin starting to toughen. Perfect fit. The small production they started to set up grew slowly but steadily. Matthew taught Isabella to make the traditional farm cheese he'd learned from his mother. The exact point of the rennet, the curd temperature, the curing time. She noted everything in an old notebook, sketched labels, calculated costs, made projections. She discovered she had a talent for organizing, for turning manual labor into business strategy. And she discovered she loved it. Not the money that might come, but the process, the creation, the building of something real with her own hands. Darius was the first customer. Bought 10 cheeses to sell at the store. In 3 days, he came back asking for 20. Word spread. Mrs. Marlene from the bed and breakfast in the neighboring town ordered pepper preserves and jabuticaba jelly. The local pastor wanted artisanal breads for the county fair. Gradually, Walter's farm came back to life, not as before, but as something new, something that belonged as much to the past as to the future. Isabella bloomed. Matthew saw it every day, in the way she woke smiling, in the lightness of her movements, in the easy laugh that echoed through the house. She'd gained a few pounds from home cooking and work that built muscle. Her face had color now. Her hands had stories. And her eyes, those eyes that had arrived empty and lost, shone with purpose. One hot December afternoon, while the 2 packaged cheeses for delivery, Isabella commented, "You know what I realized the other day? It's been almost 2 months since I thought about meetings, contracts, corporate strategy." Matthew tied twine around the last package. "And how do you feel about that?" "Free," she answered without hesitation. And then she laughed, as if the word itself were new. "I feel free." He smiled, that rare corner-of-the-mouth smile she'd learned to value. She approached, wiped a flour smudge from his face with her thumb. The touch lasted longer than needed. Their eyes met. The world slowed. "Matthew, I think I'm falling in love with you." His heart exploded in his chest. It wasn't a surprise, not really. He felt the same thing growing inside him, like a vine climbing slowly but surely. But hearing her say it out loud made everything feel real, solid, impossible to ignore. "Me too," he said, his voice rough. "I think it's been a while." She smiled, her eyes filled with water, but not from sadness, from relief, from raw, unfiltered happiness. "What do we do now?" He pulled her close, hugged her tight, feeling her body fit against his like a missing piece. "We keep going, planting, harvesting, building, together." And there, in the middle of the barn that smelled of cured cheese and new wood, surrounded by boxes of preserves and dreams wrapped in wax paper, they kissed. It was a long, deep kiss, without hurry because it had certainty, a kiss that sealed a silent promise of partnership, of complicity, of roots planted in fertile soil. But not everything was roses. 3 days later, on a heavy-skied morning announcing a storm, Isabella received a notification via the county clerk. The envelope was thick, official, sealed from the most expensive law firm in Austin. She opened it with trembling hands. Matthew was beside her, finishing putting away tools after fixing the chicken coop door. As she read, her face lost color. Her hands gripped the paper with unnecessary force, crumpling the edges. "What is it?" Matthew asked, dropping the hammer. She didn't answer right away, kept reading, her eyes racing over the lines, her jaw clenching tighter. When she finished, she let the paper fall to the table like it burned. "My father," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "My father's contesting Grandpa's will." Matthew felt his stomach knot. "How?" "He's filed a suit claiming my grandfather was mentally incompetent when he made the will, that he had signs of dementia, no discernment to make decisions about the property." She ran her hands through her hair, pulling hard. "He's trying to nullify the inheritance. But your grandfather was lucid. I saw him up to weeks before he died. He knew exactly what he was doing." "I know that. You know that. But my father hired doctors, psychiatrists, gathered any paper that could twist reality." Her voice rose, loaded with desperation and fury. "He doesn't want me to have this. He wants to sell, profit, and doesn't accept that I chose differently." Matthew approached, held her shoulders firmly. "We'll fight. We'll hire a lawyer, gather evidence, witnesses. I'll testify, Darius will testify, everyone who knew your grandfather will confirm he was fine." "You don't understand," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "My father has endless money. He can drag this out for years, can smother any defense I mount, and meanwhile the farm stays frozen." She sobbed. He pulled her into a hug. She collapsed against his chest, crying out everything she'd been holding. "We'll find a way," he murmured. "I won't let you lose this." That afternoon, while the storm finally broke and rain washed the earth furiously, Matthew had an idea. He remembered old Walter's study, a room at the back of the house no one touched. If there was any proof of the old man's lucidity, documents, records, anything that could help, it would be there. He waited for the rain to pass. When the sky cleared, he entered the study with Isabella. The place smelled of mold and old paper. There was a dark wooden desk, dusty shelves, boxes stacked in the corners. They started searching, until Matthew, rummaging in a stuck drawer of the desk, felt something odd. The drawer bottom seemed higher than normal. He tapped with his knuckles. Hollow sound, false bottom. "Isabella, come here." She approached. He forced the wood until it gave. And there, hidden like buried treasure, were 5 accounting ledgers, black hardcover, yellowed pages, Walter's tiny, firm handwriting filling every line. Isabella took the first one, opened it, read. They were meticulous records. Dates, values, purchases, sales, harvest forecasts, market analyses, investment decisions. Everything noted with surgical precision, grounded, organized. Nothing there indicated mental confusion. On the contrary, they were irrefutable proof that Walter was fully active, lucid, and in control until the end. "Matthew," she whispered, her voice choked. This changes everything." He smiled, a tired but hopeful smile. "Your grandfather kept his defense, and yours." In the following days, Isabella took the ledgers to the city. She hired a specialist in estate law, Dr. Henry, a 50-year-old man with gray hair, reading glasses hanging from his neck. He leafed through the ledgers with surgical attention, page by page, making notes on a clipboard while nodding affirmatively. "This is gold," he said finally, slapping the table with his palm. "This completely crumbles the claim of mental incapacity. No judge will ignore such detailed, consistent records. Your grandfather wasn't just lucid, he was meticulous." Isabella felt her chest loosen for the first time in days. "So we have a chance?" "More than a chance. We have a solid case." She left the office with a strange feeling in her chest. Not exactly hope, but something close. For the first time since opening that damned envelope, she could breathe without feeling the weight of the world crushing her lungs. She returned to the farm at dusk. Matthew was fixing the corral fence, hammering a new post in place of the rotted one. She got out of the car and walked to him. Said nothing, just hugged him from behind, rested her face on his broad back, felt the warmth of his body, the smell of sweat and earth that was now home. He dropped the hammer, turned slowly, held her face between his large, calloused hands. "Did it work?" "It did. The lawyer said the ledgers change everything." He smiled. That rare smile she'd learned to value more than any jewel. "I knew your grandfather wouldn't leave you hanging." She laughed, a wet laugh from tears that were no longer from fear but relief. And there, in the middle of the pasture with the sun setting on the horizon painting the sky orange and purple, they stood hugging. Just the two of them, the land and the silent promise that they wouldn't give up. But the peace didn't last long. 2 weeks later, on a hot January afternoon, Isabella was watering the garden when she heard the sound of a car coming up the dirt road. It wasn't her car or Matthew's pickup. It was an old white sedan, dented fenders, muffler rattling. The vehicle stopped at the gate. The door opened. A man Isabella had never seen stepped out. He was in his early 40s, 3-day stubble, tousled brown hair, worn jeans with grease stains, white t-shirt with sweat marks under the arms. He carried a battered leather briefcase under his arm. His eyes were dark, deep, tired, but there was something in them that made Isabella's stomach turn. An impossible familiarity, a trait she knew but couldn't name. She dropped the watering can, wiped her hands on her pants, and walked to the gate. "Can I help you?" The man turned fully, looked her up and down, not with malice but curiosity, like studying a painting in a museum trying to understand the meaning. "You're Isabella Lane? Walter's granddaughter?" The way he said her grandfather's name with intimacy, with weight, set off all the alarms in her head. "I am. Who are you?" He breathed deeply, like preparing to announce a catastrophe, like knowing the next words would explode everything. "My name is Randall Cole." Long pause. Heavy. "I'm Walter's son." The world stopped. Literally stopped. The sound of the cicadas faded. The wind ceased. Isabella's heart skipped a beat. 2, 3. The ground turned to quicksand under her feet. Her brain froze trying to process those impossible, absurd words that couldn't be true. "What?" "I know it's a shock," Randall said, his voice low but firm. "Believe me, it was for me too. But I have proof." He opened the leather briefcase, pulled out papers, yellowed, folded, time-stained, extended them to her. Isabella took them with hands trembling so much she almost dropped everything. First thing, birth certificate. Name, Randall Cole. Mother, Helen Cole. Father, Walter Hayes Lane. Date, 1982, 43 years ago. Second thing, photos. Faded black and white, torn edges. Walter Young, she recognized the face from her grandmother's albums, beside a dark-haired woman, pregnant, large belly under a simple dress. He had his arm around her. She was smiling. He wasn't. Third thing, letters. 3 of them. Tiny, firm, unmistakable handwriting. The same as the accounting ledgers. Walter's handwriting. Isabella opened the first with trembling fingers. Helen, about what we discussed. I'll deposit $500 a month into the account you opened. It's what I can do without raising suspicions. When the child is born, I'll send more. But you need to understand I can't claim this publicly. My family won't accept it. It's better for everyone if you go on with your life far from here. W. She read it again, and again, and again. The words refused to make sense. Walter, the man she loved, respected, idealized, had had a son out of wedlock, had paid the mother to disappear, had hidden it his whole life. This can't be true, she whispered, more to herself than to him. It is, Randall said, and there was pain in his voice too. My mother raised me alone. She never spoke ill of him, said he did what he could under the circumstances. But now that he's gone, I have a right to my share. I'm his son. I have the same rights as you. Isabella felt the ground collapse completely. It wasn't just the revelation about her grandfather. It was the legal implication. If Randall proved paternity, and from the papers in her hands it seemed possible, he'd have a right to half the inheritance, half the farm, half of everything she was fighting to preserve. Why are you here now? She asked, her voice coming out hoarse. Why after 43 years do you show up? Randall looked at the ground, kicked a stone. When he spoke, there was shame in his voice. Because your father found me. Isabella's blood ran cold. What? Albert Lane. He tracked me down 2 weeks ago. Offered me money, a lot of money, to file for paternity recognition and inheritance. Said if we overturned everything, we'd split the profits from the land when we sold it. The revelation hit like an atomic bomb. Albert wasn't just contesting the will for mental incapacity. He'd gone deeper, dirtier. Had sought out an illegitimate son of her father, offered a bribe, set up a full conspiracy to ensure Isabella lost everything. Did you accept? She asked, her voice like broken glass. Randall took a while to answer. Looked at her. Really looked, with those deep dark eyes that now Isabella saw the damned resemblance to Walter's. I came here first. Before accepting anything, I wanted to see the place, see who you are, understand what this piece of land means. And I don't know. I spent my whole life with nothing. My mother worked as a seamstress until her fingers couldn't take it anymore. We never had our own home, a car, security. Meanwhile, there was a farm here that was half mine by blood right. His voice rose, loaded with resentment. You ask why I'm here now? Because justice delayed is still justice. Isabella wanted to scream, wanted to curse, wanted to say he had no right, that blood didn't erase abandonment, that inheritance wasn't just DNA. But the words stuck in her throat because a small, honest, cruel part of her knew he was right. If he was Walter's son, and from the papers he seemed to be, he had legal right. What do you want? What's mine? Half. You know, if we sell this land, it becomes a subdivision, becomes speculation. And I care? This land never gave me anything. Why should I have feelings for it? Isabella had no answer. She stood there, holding those damned papers, feeling everything she'd built crumble. Randall closed the briefcase, turned halfway. My lawyer will be in touch. We'll settle this in court. And he left. The white sedan kicked up red dust, rounded the curve, disappeared. When Matthew arrived half an hour later, he found her sitting on the porch floor, hugging her knees, staring at nothing. The papers scattered around like wreckage. He didn't ask, just sat beside her, waited. It was she who spoke, her voice lifeless. My grandfather had another son, a son he abandoned, and now that son wants the farm, and my father set all this up. Matthew picked up the papers, read in silence. When he finished, his face was stony. We'll fight. Fight how, Matthew? He has legal right. He's my grandfather's son. Then we negotiate. We offer something else. With what money? Silence. No answer. Isabella buried her face in her hands, and for the first time since arriving at that farm, she wondered if she shouldn't have stayed in the city. The following days were the darkest. Isabella barely got out of bed, didn't touch the garden, didn't make cheese, didn't smile. The weight of her grandfather's betrayal, her father's conspiracy, the threat of losing everything, crushed her like a giant stone on her chest. Matthew tried to cheer her, but she was hollow, consumed by anger and despair. One night, sitting on the porch in heavy silence, Matthew said, "Your grandfather wasn't perfect. No man is. But that doesn't erase the rest." "How can you defend him?" she exploded. "He abandoned a son, paid to make him disappear." "I'm not defending. I'm saying people make mistakes. Ugly mistakes, mistakes that hurt. But they also do good things. Your grandfather left this land to you because he trusted you. That doesn't justify what he did. But it doesn't cancel everything either." She cried. Matthew held her hand. "What do I do? You decide what this land means to you, if it's worth fighting for. And if it is, we fight." Isabella looked at him, at the honest, sincere eyes. "It's worth it. Worth fighting." "Doctor." Henry devised a dual strategy. He'd present the ledgers against the incapacity claim, and contest Randall's paternity, demand DNA, investigate the letters. "But what if it's true?" Isabella asked. "Then we negotiate." But negotiating required money she didn't have. It was on a February afternoon that everything changed. Isabella was in the barn organizing cheeses when she smelled smoke. It wasn't stove smoke. It was thick, acrid smoke that burned the eyes. She ran out. The garden was on fire. Flames licked the wooden fences she and Matthew had repaired. The wind spread embers. In seconds, the fire reached the shed where they stored the first batches of cheese and tools. "Matthew!" she shouted, running to his house. He was already running with a bucket and hose, but it was little. Too little. The flames grew, hungry, devouring everything. "Call the fire department," he yelled. She ran, grabbed the phone, dialed. But the fire department came from town, 15 miles away. By the time they arrived, nothing would be left. And that's when Silas appeared. The old man came running down the road with 3 neighbors, Darius, Marlene, and Tommy. They brought buckets, hoses, wet cloths. "Don't just stand there," Silas bellowed. "Help!" And everyone worked, united, throwing water, smothering embers, saving what they could. Isabella cried while carrying buckets. Matthew shouted commands. Silas, old as he was, worked with the strength of 2. When the fire department arrived 20 minutes later, the fire was under control. The garden had turned to ashes. Part of the shed had collapsed, but the house was saved, and half the cheeses too. Isabella fell to her knees on the ground, covered in soot, hands burned, lungs burning. Matthew pulled her into a hug. She sobbed against his chest. Silas approached, removed his hat, wiped sweat from his forehead. "You didn't run when you could have," he said, his voice rough but firm. "That says a lot." She looked at him. The old man who judged her called her a spoiled rich kid, and now he'd saved everything she had. "Thank you," she whispered. He just nodded and left with the others. That night, Dr. Henry called. He had news about Randall. "We did a deeper investigation. The letters are authentic. The birth certificate too. But there's a problem," he said. "Walter never registered Randall as his son, just paid informal child support, and his mother signed a document back then renouncing any future rights in exchange for the monthly payments. And that helps us? It does. Weakens his case a lot, but doesn't nullify it. He can still seek posthumous paternity recognition. It'll be harder, longer, but not impossible." Isabella hung up, told Matthew. "So it's not over." "No, but we bought time." 2 weeks later, Albert's suit for mental incapacity was dismissed. The accounting ledgers had done their job. The judge declared no evidence of dementia or incapacity. First victory. But Randall was still in play, and the legal battle would drag on for months, maybe years. It was Silas who brought the letter. One afternoon, he showed up at the farm with a yellowed envelope. "Found this in the things of Walter's he left me to keep. I think you should read it." Isabella opened it. It was a letter written by Walter months before he died. addressed to her. Isabella, my dear granddaughter, if you're reading this, I've already gone. I want you to know this land is yours, not by blood, but by choice. I made mistakes in life, mistakes that haunt me, but this farm is my redemption, and you are my hope that it remains what it always was, a place of honest work, deep roots, simple but dignified life. Don't let anyone take this from you, not your father, not anyone. Fight. You're stronger than you imagine. Grandpa Walter, Isabella cried. Matthew read the letter and was moved too. And in that moment, she decided, no matter how long it took, no matter how many lawsuits she faced, she would fight to the end. 6 months later, Randall's suit was dismissed. The document signed by his mother renouncing rights, combined with the lack of official paternity registration, weakened the case to the point of unsustainability. His lawyer gave up. Albert, seeing the imminent defeat, backed off. Isabella won. But victory didn't come without scars. The fire had destroyed part of the production. The lawsuits had drained the little money she'd managed to save, and the revelation about Walter had left deep marks on her soul. On an August afternoon, exactly 1 year after she'd first arrived, Isabella was sitting on the porch when she saw a familiar car coming up the road. Randall's white sedan. She stood, tense. Matthew appeared beside her, protective. Randall got out of the car. He looked different, lighter, less angry. I didn't come to fight, he said before she could speak. I came to say goodbye. Isabella frowned. What do you mean? I dropped it. The suit, the fight, everything. He sighed. My mother died last month, and before she went, she told me something. Said Walter may have wronged her, but he was always a man of honor in what he promised, and that I shouldn't destroy what he built just out of resentment. He pulled a paper from his pocket. It was the formal renunciation of any rights to the inheritance. I signed it. I don't want anything anymore. Just wanted you to know. I understand. I understand why you fought. Isabella felt her eyes burn. Thank you. Randall nodded, went back to the car. Before getting in, he turned and said, Take good care of it. This land. It deserves it. And he left. This time, for good. Isabella breathed. For the first time in months, she felt the weight lift from her shoulders. Matthew hugged her. She rested her head on his chest and let the tears, now of relief, fall. In the following months, the farm was reborn. The garden replanted. The shed rebuilt. Cheese production doubled. Mrs. Marlene opened a shop in town just to sell the farm's products. Darius set up a partnership to distribute in other areas. Walter's name was spoken with respect again. And Silas, the stubborn old man who'd once judged her, became a friend, a partner, an advisor. On a December night with stars shining like diamonds in the dark sky, Matthew took Isabella to the peach tree in the yard, the same one where she'd sat the first day. There's something I've wanted to ask you for a long time, he said, his voice firm but laden with emotion. She smiled, already knowing what was coming. Ask. He held her hands, looked deep into her eyes. Do you want to build this with me? Not just the farm, but life. For real. Forever. She didn't hesitate. Yes. 1,000 times yes. They kissed. And there, under that starry sky, with the smell of damp earth in the air and the sound of cicadas singing, two hearts united. Not with pomp, not with luxury, but with truth, with roots, with love planted in fertile soil that would never wither. Months later, they married in the town chapel. Simple ceremony. Silas was best man. Mrs. Marlene made the cake. Darius played guitar. And at the party under a cloudless sky, everyone danced, ate cheese toasted with homemade wine. Albert wasn't invited, and Isabella didn't miss him. The farm prospered, became a reference in the region. Tourists started visiting, wanting to hear the story of the heiress who left the empire to plant roots. Isabella gave interviews, taught artisanal cheese classes, showed that success wasn't just money, it was belonging. And Matthew, the simple man who just wanted to help a neighbor, discovered that by opening that rusty door a year before, he'd opened much more. He'd opened a future, opened love, opened life. 5 years later, on a sunny spring morning, Isabella was on the porch, now renovated, painted, full of flowers, when she felt two small arms hug her leg. "Mommy, Daddy Matthew said today we're planting tomatoes." She looked down. Sophie, 4 years old, dark curly hair, honey-colored eyes, smiled with missing baby teeth. "Daddy Matthew or Papa Matthew?" Isabella teased. "Papa," the girl shouted, laughing. Matthew appeared in the doorway, carrying Miguel on his hip, 2 years old, round cheeks, laughing at something only he understood. "Ready?" Matthew asked, smiling. Isabella looked at them, at her husband, her children, the farm around, at the repaired fences, the producing fields, the future planted with work and love. "I am," she said. "Always will be." And together, the four went out. Matthew teaching the children to care for the land as his father had taught him. Isabella noting everything in a new notebook. Records to leave for the children, the grandchildren, for whoever came after. Because that land was no longer just inheritance. It was legacy. It was history. It was roots that would span generations. And it all started with a rusty key, a dusty door, and a simple man who didn't know that, by helping a mysterious stranger, he was actually opening his own heart to the greatest love story he'd live. The land doesn't lie. It returns what you plant. And they planted love. They harvested forever.